I recently got a question in response to my video about what I tell my biracial children. And the question was how I define biracial and what it's like to be in that sort of marriage. Before I go into that, I'm just going to remind you that I'm a sociologist, and this channel is where I share my perspective living around the world in countries like Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Pakistan, and a bunch of other places. So like and subscribe so you can get a unique take on issues of love, health, race, sex, politics, and a whole lot more. Okay, back to the question. Well, yes, I am in what you could call a biracial marriage, but there's an additional layer because not only are we from two different races, we're from two very different societies. I come from a Western country, the United States, obviously, and my wife is from Pakistan. Now, Pakistan does have some British influence, but that's just one of many influence on what is very different from anything you would experience in a Western country. So let's go into the race issue. In America, we have a racial hierarchy where people are considered to be from different ethnic groups. They're considered to be different parts of the world, and there's a way of basically ranking them from top to bottom and assigning different, let's say, privileges and benefits to each rank. In Pakistan, it's very different. There is a color scale, so to speak, and people of lighter skin are privileged within that scale. However, it's not something where people of different skin colors or even hair textures are seen as being from different places. It's just light skin or dark skin members of your own family. So you could have cousins, even siblings or parents who are very different skin colors, and it's not thought that they should have different labels. There are just kind of descriptive words for people where someone might be called words that mean fair or light skin or dark or black, but it's not, there's no, let's say, ethnic background or different geographical region attached to those. You will see people of all skin colors from, blonde haired and blue eyed all the way to nearly jet black with curlier or still straight hair texture anywhere you go, anywhere in the country. So what happens with colorism is it's seen as being more desirable to have lighter skin, and you will generally see models and actors or actresses being of the lighter skin tones. Some people will have a prejudice against darker skinned people, but what you got to remember in the South Asian context is there are issues of caste. Generally, different castes have different colors. It's not that one caste has a single color, it's more like a range. And to make a long story short, people who are of a very dark skin tend to be of different castes than people who are either medium or light. And that could be gypsies, so to speak, which are, to be honest, South Asia is the home of the Roma people, who are commonly known as gypsies. So you see quite a lot of them, and they tend to be very dark skinned. And they kind of live on wagons, and they may settle, but they still live in their wagons, and then they go somewhere else. Those are people with their own language. You don't tend to interact with them very much. It's actually only in the cities that you find a lot of light-skinned people, and they tend to have Turkish, Persian backgrounds, or even Pashtun, which is a people who are related to, they're an Iranian ethnic group who are from the north, and they've migrated down over the centuries. All that basically means that from my wife's perspective, this idea that someone who's dark-skinned is not like us doesn't really exist. It's more just that some people are dark, some people are light, and yes, some have very negative associations towards dark skin, but not all. And one thing that we have in common that actually transcends not only our racial differences, but the interpretations of race that we grew up around, is that we're both dedicated and sincere Muslims. And in Islam, there is a notion that, yes, you have tribes and nations, but that is for you to get to know each other. No one is better than anyone else because of their background. Now, it's obvious that many Muslims do not live by this ideal, but I'm a convert, so it's something that I didn't come to with a lot of baggage. I didn't grow up in a family that ascribed to these ideals in theory, but didn't apply them. Rather, my family didn't have Islamic ideals at all. Secondly, my wife's father in particular was someone who had traveled to different countries throughout his lifetime, and therefore he had a chance to really evaluate those principles and develop friendships and relationships that even lasted decades after he resettled back in Pakistan with people from different parts of the world, and definitely different races, ethnicities, and skin colors. So that's the context of actually living up to that ideal that my wife grew up in. And even though I come from a Christian background, it was really character that my parents used to evaluate people. So for them, they weren't going to encourage or discourage a friendship based on where that person was from or what they looked like. Rather, it was more, do you have classes with that person? I remember these are the questions my mom and dad would ask. Are they in your classes or are they on your team? Because I played basketball. The reason why is I was in all honors classes. So anyone else who was taking honors classes with me couldn't be getting in that much trouble. Couldn't be really having a lot of bad stuff going on at home and a lot of bad stuff going on outside of school, because it's hard to maintain that level. Likewise, on the team, my coaches were very strict, so there was nobody who was going to be on the basketball team who was really messing up in life. So it wasn't where are they from, what do they look like, what's their family name, this sort of thing. And for my wife, it was basically the same thing. She has light and dark-skinned family members in her immediate family and extended family. Now, it just so happens that she's very light-skinned, so without going into too much detail, you could look at her and assume that she was from Europe as easily as you could assume she was from a lot of different places. I mean, there are white people everywhere. Basically, Arabia and South Asia and other parts of Asia are just as close to the Caucasus region as anywhere in Europe. So you will find people who look identical to each other in very disparate regions, but if you think of where they most likely all originated from, it kind of makes sense. Iran and northern Pakistan and Afghanistan, for that matter, are just as close to the Caucasus region as England or Germany. Okay, so sharing the different ways that our societies look at and classify people is something that we've had many discussions about. Basically, what I've had to discover from her are what associations she has with Blackness and what associations her people have with Blackness. It hasn't been a pressing matter for either one of us because we've spent our entire marriage outside of each other's countries, except for a recent stint that I spent living in Pakistan. But that was after we'd already been married for 10 years. So it wasn't as though, look, you have a lot of things that I've got to get you to understand because now I'm taking you into America and there are these tensions, there are these dangers, at least that I face, that you need to know about. There are these stigmas towards biracial children that you need to know about. you might say that most people in Arabia, or quite a few people in South Asia, look biracial in the sense of appearing as though they have mixed black and white ancestry, meaning in the American imagination, most of the Arabs that you see are people that you could consider to be light-skinned African Americans or mixed. It's not as though they actually are a mix of European and African. It's just that people that we have in America that are European and African resemble most Arabs and vice versa. So my children don't stick out in the sense of, here are blacks, here are Mexicans, here are East Asians, here are whites, and what are you? Like you might experience in an American setting. They don't really have anything that screams a given ethnicity about them at all. So basically, I'm not saying that they blend in on purpose, but they blend in naturally. No one will really look twice at them, whether they are in Pakistan or in Arabia. So that's convenient, but it's not something that I've decided to use to avoid the discussions and the awareness. Number one, they need to know that most people fall short of whatever ideals they ascribe to, including these ideals of treating people equally or treating people by merit, judging people by their character, giving people their rights regardless of who they are or where they're from. So I need them to be prepared to know that you won't always be treated based on who you are, but people will look at where you come from and what you look like. I also need to teach them against attitudes that they may encounter. So they aren't going to be taught discriminatory practices at home, but they're going to be in conversations where people who do have those attitudes are going to express their views. So I teach them, look, don't treat people based on what they look like, whether they're differently abled, whether they have an unusual look that you're not used to. Even if other people are going to do that, you shouldn't. So if I take this completely out of the racial context, I remember we were recently at a park and a little girl came who was not able to speak well considering her age, and she had some kind of spinal condition where she couldn't stand up straight and she had a large hump. So I guess that's what people refer to historically as like a hunchback. And she was kind of running around and wanting to play, and we had a frisbee and she just kind of came in the mix, and I said, okay, throw her the frisbee, and we made a little triangle and had her in it, and then she wanted to play tag and stuff. So I told my kids, don't run too fast because she can't run as fast as you. So, run away, but don't run so far that it's not even fun for her anymore. And they played along, and my kids had fun and stuff like that. And then we left, and afterwards I sat them down because I felt like, hey, this can be a lesson that you saw that girl was very different, but didn't you see that she just likes to play like you? She likes to throw a frisbee like you do. She likes to play tag like you. So you did the right thing by not saying, well, let's focus on what's different instead of what's the same. You see what I mean? And as I said in the previous video, there hasn't been a normal for my family so far, because what's normal when your mother's from Pakistan and she's white, your father's from America and he's black, and you're growing up in a third country with kids of every description, black British, biracial British and Indonesian, Canadian and Filipino, whatever you want to say, people of just, if I went down the list, it would take me too long. So there hasn't been a normal for them to, in their minds, fix and used to otherize other people. So, yes, one day that will come, and yes, they will be in situations where there is a normal, and most likely they'll be falling outside of that, because even if their appearances don't stand out, their culture, their attitude, their habits, their language probably still will. And those are all things that people use to evaluate. So it's a little bit deeper than biracial. It's something that people call third culture. Third culture kids who have um, parents from one place growing up in a second place, but having a culture which is different from either. Um, I would say that it's a fourth cultural situation for my kids because they have parents from two different places. They're growing up in a third place and they're having a culture which is neither identical to their mother's background, neither identical to their father's background, nor is it identical to the locality in which they're being raised. So, to make a long story short, what I try to apply in my marriage is that I want to take the best of both worlds and leave the worst of both worlds. So whatever advantages I feel that my culture gives me and whatever advantages I feel that my wife's culture gives her, we try to combine those, and then whatever bad habits or negative cultural traits that we both come out of, we try to leave those behind and fill in the gaps with the positives that we can find from the other side, or do something completely different and unique of our own sort of imagining. And with my kids growing up in that, I feel it's a very unique experience. I feel that in some ways I can let them be naive a little bit longer than a lot of children get to. I can let them be innocent a longer than a lot of children get to, simply because the dire situations and the racial tensions and the really ugly um, aspects of being in a discriminatory, racist, colorist, classist, casteist, otherist society isn't something that they've had to experience as of yet. And so while they in their minds are aware of, the fact that people do these things, they haven't really seen it happening. They haven't really experienced it, happening against them. So we can still teach them from the examples and from the history of Islamic societies and the different races that the original Muslims had and the different teachings that Islam has. We can teach them from our own sort of experiences and stuff like that. And I hope one day they will be ready when, the reality inevitably sort of hits. I don't know when and how that will be, but for now, it's been quite a relief to not have them go through what I had to go through from the earliest experiences that I can remember until now. And I'm just going to continue to try to make the best of it. So I hope I answered the question of what a biracial relationship and what biracial children are. I think that when you say biracial and you talk about two races, it could be two of any number of races, and it's even about two different conceptions of race. So my situation is unique. But again, I think that it's part of what I wanted to see in life. I wanted to find something different out there. I wanted to find something better. And I really feel that in my family, I have found what I was searching for in life, even if I couldn't define it when I set out on this search, which was just a different and better way of living. And not only because there were ideals that I wanted to reach and negatives that I wanted to really separate myself from, but even, you might say, for lack of a better word, from an aesthetic point of view, I just didn't feel interested in everything that I already knew or anything that I already knew. I just said, look, the world is so big. There's got to be something out there besides this. I don't want to already know what's going to happen. I don't want to already know every discussion that's going to be had with my wife. I don't want to already know everything that she's most likely to think on a given issue. I want to find something different in that person that I can't expect, that I can't even imagine. And when you have children from that, of course, you get something even more wonderful, more magical, you might say. So that's me. I'd love to hear more from you. And at the very least, I hope that you will stay tuned so that we can have more of these discussions. I definitely have a lot more to share. And I'm just going to end it right there. So bye for now.